want to talk to you in this Urshan Leadership Minute about leader limitations that we need to get serious about overcoming if we are going to be leaders that build great teams. First and foremost, one of the main obstacles to building a great team is just a simple lack of interest from leadership. It's really hard for me to imagine that anybody would want to do ministry alone. We were not designed to do ministry alone. The church is integrated. Even Ephesians 4 says the body is fitly joined together. You look at the church of Antioch, it talks about the dream team there that led and grown that diverse church. But some people, ironically, either because of the culture they came from or the culture they've created, choose to lead in a, we'll say, Lone Ranger fashion. If an organization, however, only has two levels, the leader and the followers, the leader can always maintain better control. He can keep his hands on the wheel or her hands on the wheel at all times. And this may be a more comfortable position to drive the future from the wheel. But here's the trade-off. The cost of control is the choking or a bottleneck, if you will, that lands on that leader's logistical desk. That control is a control point that only so much communication, only so much influence, only so many decisions can flow across that person's desk at one time. Secondly, the control cost is that the organization or the church will only grow to the level or limitation of that primary leader's abilities. We want our organizations, we definitely want our churches to grow beyond the limitations or the abilities or the potential of one person. And we break apart that ceiling, that threshold. We can explode through that in growth, in influence, in changing our communities when we get beyond ourselves trying to control every mechanism that God has called us in our mission. The second limitation or an obstacle to overcome in building a great team is a lack of skills. So you can get over the lack of interest, but if you have a lack of skill, we need to talk about that for a moment, because the ability to build teams is both an art and a science. A couple of great books to reference real quickly about building teams, as it does take a number of skills. I want to mention Multipliers by Liz Weissman, great read. Crucial Conversations, incredible read. Be a People Person, old school book by John Maxwell, and let's not underestimate Patrick Lencioni's works, and then How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, something every leader should read every year. These are skills that can help you as foundational things are put into your leadership, into your toolbox, if you will, that all team building skills are a basic trust and a confidence in people. Skills are needed because team members must be recruited, they must be trained, they must be then released under moderate, we'll call, management. Just because you release somebody doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable. Quite the opposite. Accountability becomes even more important the further we release somebody to control their own destiny in leadership. We've got to engage, we've got to equip, then we've got to empower. A team building leader must learn to work with multiple levels of authority. You're not going to treat everybody on your team the same way because they are maturing as a different type of leader as others might be on your team. But it's all under the direction of the visionary leader, or in the church, it would be the lead pastor. A team builder must learn to become a trainer and a facilitator. And sometimes we get these roles confused when we should be facilitating them to train, them to decide, them to shape. Sometimes we get confused where training voice and our facilitating voice are used at the wrong context. But we need to use wisdom there as a leader and give them tools, give them training, give them support then to facilitate them succeeding in their level of authority. Team builders need to become skilled, disciplined communicators. Now, it doesn't matter if you're a public communicator. There are many forms of communication, some of which are nonverbal. But we need to communicate to people and understand what languages they receive and what type of communication best would convey your influence in their life. I want to talk about one specific limitation to building great teams. And this is probably one of the greatest hindrances to great teams. And this is leader insecurity. Leader insecurity. I've seen insecurity kill more teams than probably any other thing. Chris Hodges said, if we don't get better ourselves as leaders, we'll start to become natural critics of those who are becoming better. Because jealousy starts to creep in, and that fuels this thing called insecurity. Insecurity fuels criticism of others' successes, and it fuels the inflation of our own successes as we begin to compensate for covering the level of insecurity in a certain area of our leadership or ministry. The jealous will always find ways to fire at the successful. It doesn't mean that they're your enemy. It's just the only way they know how to react to the struggle of their own insecurity. We must be wise enough as leaders not to react as they are reacting to their own insecurities. And we certainly don't want to demonstrate that in our own leadership. If we're to build and lead great teams, we as leaders must be honest about our insecurities so they do not dismantle proactive vision with reactive emotions. Now let me just stop for a moment and say, every man and every woman has insecurities. The difference between being an insecure leader and being a secure leader with insecurities is the secure leader is honest about their insecurities. They're accountable in those areas of perhaps weakness. They look at the areas that they are not naturally gifted or strong, and they know those areas. And a great leader that has found security by being honest about their insecurities can then bring in a team of people that are gifted in areas that they are not gifted in, and there's no threat because the team goal, the collective group of ability is what we are increasing by admonishing their gifts and recognizing where we are not gifted. The basis of insecurity is fear, F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. It may be that the fear of you losing control, the fear of being replaced, the fear of not being everyone's favorite leader. Perhaps it would be a tragedy if you brought somebody in on your team, you're supposed to be the lead guy, and somebody on the team becomes more popular than you are. The fear perhaps if they rise up to become great themselves, that they're going to leave and do their own thing. Or perhaps the fear of other leaders being disloyal. Here's the honest truth. If you lead, you pastor, you minister for any time whatsoever, you may experience many, if not all of these truths. Over a period of time, a leader who chooses to build a team may experience many of these pains. But here's the thing. These fears cannot cause us to be hindered in building great teams and facing our own insecurities. Because there are some greater fears in not building a team that we need to really value. The fear that our city will remain unreached with the gospel of Jesus Christ. The fear that your people will never reach their true potential. The fear that you will be in violation of your calling as a leader of other leaders. The fear that you will one day reach a place of burnout, as Moses did, being alone and nobody around to support the cause of Christ. Another obstacle that I want to mention is a perfectionist personality. Now, I have to be honest, I struggle greatly with this one. And the problem with perfectionist personality is you think everything needs to be done a certain way, your way. That's got to be the best way. Leaders will find it very difficult to develop and grow under your ministry and under your leadership if you impose your way on top of every other person. If people are paranoid, if they're fearing failure, they'll hold back and they won't excel in their own gifting and in their own calling. Micromanaging must go if the team is to grow. The leader must change. That starts with us. and allow others to find more meaningful and challenging levels of leadership. This doesn't mean don't hold people accountable, but it does mean that we trust them to go and trust them that they're a vital part of the team, even if it's a different part than we will play. Accept the learning curve that things may be worse at first. I would rather have a season where everybody's given a C+ average, knowing that we'll have 8 A+ averages in 6 months, than just hold the wheel, hold the fort, do it all my way, and we'll have perfectionism for a very short-lived tenure, but then knowing that our reach will be very limited, because as a church or an organization gets bigger, it must get broader. Accept the learning curve and know that we're getting broader as we grow. Another limitation to overcome in building great teams is misplaced priorities. The demands of ministry are heavy. The demands of responsibility and leadership are heavy. And it's easy to be overwhelmed by the daily care of the church or your organization and never get around to building a team, never really have time to develop leaders. I can't tell you how many people I talk to around the country that say, man, building leaders is a really, really important thing to me, but it's something I'm going to do next year or in the next season of my ministry. It's just, I don't have time to invest in leaders right now. I dare say we cannot make this mistake. We don't have the time not to develop leaders. The result of this vicious cycle of being overwhelmed by the needs of people with no time and no training of leaders, things just getting worse, it just snowballs. And the problem is, as we are growing and as the church is growing, we need to have developed other leaders to help care for those people better than we could with just these two hands. We are either controlled by pressures or priorities, but not both. If we are reactive, we are not leading proactively. The press of people can sap a leader and his or her vision and creative thinking. And instead of being a leader in the church, we become a follower, always responding to whatever the squeaky wheel is or whatever fire we have to put out. I hope that we can find time in developing teams and developing leadership mechanisms in our churches and in our organizations that we're creating a lot of fires more than we're putting out fires. Many good leaders have fallen prey to the tyranny of the temporal while neglecting those things which are eternal. We have got to make it a priority. Finish our course means to empower other leaders and multiply our ministries through others. There is no success without successors. And the last limitation is just confusion, confused concepts of what it means to be a leader. Leaders were meant to lead, and by definition, leading means that someone is following, not being funneled. Leadership is influence. It cannot be control. Leaders who have a heart for people may find it difficult to lead through other people, but you can, as a litmus test in great leadership, realize that when you see leadership coming through people that you are leading, then you have arrived at another level of influence and leadership in your organization. If you love people, you want to be with people. So some of it may be great intentions. You say, I want to directly influence that person. I want to directly care and lead that person. But I know that as a leader, I need to allow others to have that blessing. A leader with a true shepherd's heart may feel conflicted and guilty for not being hands-on with every situation. This is not guilt that was placed by God. But it is more important that people know Jesus Christ than they know you. And it's very affirming to be needed. It's very affirming for them to want your hands on every situation or influence in their life or to hear your voice directly. But God wants His church to grow up and grow out. And if you can multiply yourself through other leaders, many more people can come to know Jesus and many more people can come to grow His kingdom. Remember Moses, who was wearing out himself and his people, and the team that Moses built was not all about Moses getting more time off. It was to preserve his ministry for the long haul, and it was the best thing for God's people. Leadership cannot be done alone. In a closing text here, Exodus 18, 17, and 18. And Moses' father-in-law said unto him, the thing that thou doest is not good, Moses. Thou wilt surely wear away both thou and this people that is with thee. For this thing is too heavy for thee, and thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. God did not call us into ministry, into leadership, into influence, to be alone in it. He called us to invest and love others.